difficult to tell you exactly how one arrived at the physicality of it. I knew that it was, I mean, it was based on a corkscrew, really, because that is how his spine was in his skeleton, which existed, which I'd seen. I don't know how on earth he managed to move at all. It's extraordinary. How one gets, you know, I mean, there is a dignity to him. There has to be a dignity to him. That is what the story's about. I think that actually was fact, apart from anything else, and certainly something that David wanted to use as an image very, very considerably. And we rather played into our hands as well, because David was rather anxious to show the full makeup of the Elephant Man rather earlier in the film than certainly I felt it should be. I thought the longer we can hold on without the full image being seen, the better. And being as the makeup was therefore, because we were so behind with it, and we were working on it while we were shooting as well, this was going on. So I mean, I'd be doing scenes with the disguise on, and then going straight down to Old Kent Road to work with Chris Tucker, and so on. So I mean, it was, and I have to say that I was persuading Chris, saying, don't get it ready too quickly, because there's another sequence coming up next week, which I would love to do with the disguise. Partly because the disguise was so incredibly successful. As you say, people remember it. Indeed, when it showed in Japan, it did so well in Japan that, see, I think it's the only reason that I saw any money from the back end of it, because there wasn't time to hide it. But that aside, my friend Jeremy Thomas, producer, was in Japan, and he said the streets of people, kids running around all the time with paper bags over their head and one piece saying, "Elephanta man, Elephanta man." So it was, it obviously had an impact, yeah. There was absolutely no need to improvise anything. It was, I mean, I'm not against improvisation if it's going to get you somewhere. There was a very, very precise and beautifully written script. And I prefer it that way. I much prefer a writer to write it than me. Even though, arguably, you know more about the character than anybody else. It doesn't mean to say that you're going to come up with the best lines. And the scenes were so exquisitely written, there was no need to improvise anything, I don't think. I mean, there was so much food for the imagination, and that's, after all, what any performance is based on, an imaginative leap. Yes, we rehearsed, we did. Most of the scenes, as I said, certainly the scenes that required a full makeup were all rehearsed, because we had that day in between. And we had plenty of time to do it as well. It was a actually extremely good way of working. We got a huge amount done in the day with a running buffet. And then we had that luxury of being able to rehearse scenes properly on the day in between. The two big ones. Well, I think Anthony, I'm on record as saying many times, I think it was an absolutely superb performance. It was hugely helpful to me. And it was hugely helpful, the fact that he was so respectful of and moved by the makeup and so on. And was very vocal about that at the beginning, which really made me feel very much more confident, because it's difficult, you know, it's a difficult situation. If there was the slightest chance of it being a bit of a laugh, I would have been sunk. He was terrifically helpful, very helpful. And I mean, really we didn't have a lot of conversation during it, because there wasn't much. I mean, I was not in a position to have much of a conversation, you know. Oh, I was terrified of John, absolutely. I mean, he's a childhood hero, you know, and I never quite knew what to say to John, you know. We got on, I think, terribly well, but you know, he was very, very aloof, John, and very difficult. I mean, I have every now and then people say that they're frightened of me, and I just think, well, if it's anything like that, then I must do everything I can to put them at their ease, because it's not a nice feeling. It's not a very nice feeling to be in awe of someone. But we got over it. We got over it. But I was very in awe of John Gilbert, who, one of the great actors. Well, I think that what Mike brought to it was an absolute reality. He knew how far to go and how far to go and how far not to go. He had the style. He had the style that David Lynch had in mind. I think absolutely to a T. Terrific performance. And I really like Mike anyway. So that was easy. She was terrific in it. And she shouldn't be left out. Yes, you're quite right. Shouldn't be left out at all. And she was hugely helpful. She was very encouraging. It was in the early days, because I think the first scene I did was the scene where I'm the Friends scene, you know, when I'm in their house and looking at the mantelpiece and seeing the photographs and so on. And I really thought they'd found a way to make me not enjoy filming the first day. It was tough. I had no idea how it was going across or anything. She was very helpful, terrifically. And apart from that, her own performance was spot on. If I remember rightly, it was 14 weeks. And I say that because I'd finished the main body of Heaven's Gate. And when we'd finished Elephant Man, I then rehearsed and did the prologue to Heaven's Gate after we'd done the whole of the Elephant Man, the whole of it. And it was a 5-day shoot for the prologue, which is one of the biggest coups in film history, I think. And it cost the same as the whole of the Elephant Man. It was a tiring shoot. Certainly. Oh, yes, it was. It was a demanding shoot, but it was hugely enjoyable. It was a great crew. And we've talked about, you know, Freddie Francis, talked about David. David just grew in confidence as the film went on, too. He was, you know, he was in England. Nobody knew him. Nobody, you know, who was this upstart and so on, you know, young man, very young man, really, looking like a young Jimmy Stewart. And the people were very wary of him, you know, and quite dismissive of him to start with. I don't think they were by the end. He discusses everything, yes. I mean, David's a very open person. He's not, he'll talk about the images he's using and so on. He's very determined when he's got an idea. He doesn't, he's not easily dissuaded. I don't think anything was changed from the original script. There was stuff that was left out. In fact, I can remember calling up once. I hadn't heard anything after we'd finished shooting for about 3 or 4 months. I said, "How's it all going?" And there was a pause at the other end, and they said, "Well, John, there's a film in here somewhere," which was fairly distressing. I thought, oh, I don't know what that means. Don't say all that effort's gone down the tubes. But no, it came out fine. I think it probably changed my thought about quite a lot of things. It's difficult to put your finger on those, you know, but anything of that kind of size and experience is very peculiar if it didn't have some effect on you. I think it definitely did. Probably in my own demeanour as well.
In what way?
Oh, well, I think it puts you into quite a humbling position. Exploitation is an endless argument because whatever is good, there is always a bad to it. There's no such thing as being simply good or simply bad, and you can always find a way of pointing the finger in an adverse way. In the same way, if you really care, you can usually find rather a good way to point a finger too. It's often not as exciting. There was a lot of discussion about Treves' motives, yes. And there's no question of the fact that Treves was an ambitious man. But I think also there's no question of the fact that that's why it's never so black and white, you see. I mean, he may well have started off the whole procedure as, my goodness, this is really interesting, this is going to be fascinating as a medical thing. And then he became involved with the person, with the very character and being of John Merrick. And I think certainly the way in which we played it. I mean, you can't be real. You can create your own reality, but you can't be real. So, because we don't know what the reality of it was, and otherwise we'd be making a documentary. But the way in which we saw it was that he became more and more involved, and hopefully, as the audience, as he saw more, the audience saw more, and really explaining quite a simple premise that people are not necessarily what they appear to be. Well, let me say this about that, as J.F. Kennedy would say. It was one of the few scenes that was shot on location, and this ghastly and pompous urinal, Victorian urinal, and it was perfectly hideous, and it was a difficult scene to do too, because it was a very difficult part to play when you were being watched by the public as well. So one was hidden away as much as possible, but one was still going through a very disquieting area when you were being watched by people all the time, you know. I knew from the way in which I intended to play it that it was the only point in the film where his emotions get control of him, that he loses control, rather, of his emotions. And it's the rawest area in the film. And I knew that was going to be, because I could think that was the way I couldn't see the script again was my springboard, and that seemed to me to be intended. So that's how that came about. But look, when you say knew that that was going to be the defining moment of the film, we didn't even know that the film was going to be, was going to have any. We didn't know that it was going to be regarded in the way that it has come to be regarded. No idea. I mean, I think we all felt that it was absolute film and that it was absolutely worth all the effort that was there. But we didn't know that it was going to have that sort of success. And I mean, it wasn't even helped by Paramount, with all due respect, to the company, because they didn't know how to sell it. They had no idea how to sell it. I mean, I can remember going to the first preview at Paramount, first public preview at Paramount in Los Angeles. And the studio boss said, when I went up to him, because it was an extraordinary show. I mean, people falling all over me and weeping and crying, and as only could happen in Los Angeles. And I went up and said to him, well, your fears should be allayed, because I knew he was having worries about how to sell it. And he said, well, John, it's always difficult to sell a monster movie. Which seemed to me an extraordinary thing to say, being as that's precisely what the film wasn't. However, that's Hollywood thinking, as it was there. It was in front of you. There's nothing you could say about it. And they really didn't help it very much. It had one poster, I think, I remember, on Sunset Strip. But when it opened, the lines were right round the cinema twice. So somewhere along the line, word of mouth had got out. Freddie Francis always reckoned that word of mouth starts in the labs, that the boys in the labs say, we got something coming out here. I think we were aware it found its audience from the very beginning. But you see, these are in the days when you could open a film in one cinema in New York and one cinema in Los Angeles, and then when it filled out to capacity and people were screaming, you could open in another one and then another one, and it's what you call a mushroom opening. You can't. Very, very rarely does that happen nowadays. It's usually a blanket opening. In which case, I think probably Elephant Man would have died the death, because I think it needed. It was a word-of-mouth film. As I say, it wasn't given a huge amount of help from Paramount, as it was then. And but I think we were aware of the fact that it was that it found its audience all right from the very beginning. And then there was a big buzz about it. And of course, it was the beginning of the year. It was March opening. So we got scuppered for Oscars and things. What I know now is I certainly didn't know then that if you're going to get Oscars, then you have to have big campaigns, which seems to me to be repulsive, really. It shouldn't have to have campaigns, and you shouldn't have to go campaigning to people to vote for you. I mean, it's ridiculous somehow, you know. But I spent most of the time on the Oscar night, because we got 8 nominations and no Oscars. And I said, look, if we'd got 1 Oscar, it would have destroyed the uniformity. We can't have that. No, it's good. 8 Oscars, no Oscars. I mean, 8 nominations, no Oscars. Fine. And everybody lightened up and laughed for a little bit, but then 5 minutes later, they were very serious about Oscars in America. It's the film, certainly, that, as far as I know, that David set out to make, and it's certainly the film that I set out to make. I mean, everything in it is what I hoped to do. You know, of course, you could always feel you could do one scene a bit better or whatever, but you know, it's what was intended. Well, I think the film's about a lot of things. It's and most of them not. You know, they're not black and white. I think a lot of it's about nuance in life. But the simplest way to look at it, it's a film about enlightening a public as to what is deeply misunderstood. It's things are not what they seem to be. That what is it's in a line, really. It's in a line of things that, in a sense, that I've done, and it's about many of the same things as, say, the Naked Silver Servant. It's about, but it's much more right on, in a sense. I did. I kept the head, the cranium, and I didn't know where to put it. And I had a very small house in Hampstead at the time, and I put it up at the top of a wardrobe and left it there. And then I was getting a house in Oxfordshire, and I wasn't staying in the house in Hampstead very much. And I had a girlfriend looking after it. I mean, a friend, not a girlfriend, a friend looking after it. And I got a call saying, there's been a burglary. And I said, oh, God. Yes, I had a feeling that might happen. She said, don't worry, though. She said, nothing's been taken at all. They opened the wardrobe door, and the Elephant Man cranium fell out. And he obviously scarpered. He just ran for it, because probably in the dark, he didn't know quite what had fallen out of the wardrobe, and it certainly looked grotesque enough to give him frighten the knickers off him. So he disappeared, taking nothing at all, having knocked the back door down. So yes, I did keep something, and it protected me. I often think of him when, in respect of lives much less fortunate than our own. And it's something I think we perhaps don't think enough about. You know, I mean, but as I say, I don't want to sound precious, but we are probably in the top 2% in the world in terms of what fortune we have. And when people are talking about the sanctity of life, I think they should take a little look at other people who may not totally agree.